The twin suns of Valkara burned over the red desert as the crowd gathered around the grand arena. The air trembled with noise. Thousands of alien voices shouted one name again and again. Serenia, Serenia, the unbeaten warrior. She stood in the center of the ring, tall and calm, her silver armor shining under the sunlight. Her blue skin glowed faintly, her long dark hair tied back with a golden band, and her eyes, cold and sharp, watched the horizon with quiet confidence. For 7 years, no one had defeated her. Not once. Every challenger, from warlords to mercenaries, had fallen at her feet. Her rule in the arena had become a legend, and she enjoyed every moment of it. But power had made her lonely. She had no equal, no one she could respect, no one who could understand the fire inside her heart. So one day she made a vow before the entire world. She raised her weapon high and shouted, "I will obey only the one who can defeat me in battle." The crowd gasped, and her words spread like a storm through the galaxy. Warriors from distant worlds came to challenge her, hoping to claim her promise. Some wanted power, some wanted fame, others wanted her heart. But all of them failed. Each battle ended the same way, with Serenia standing proud and her opponent lying broken in the dust. As months passed, fewer and fewer came to fight her. Even her own people began to whisper that no one in the galaxy was strong enough. Serenia's pride remained, but inside she felt something she had never felt before. Emptiness. She had fought so many times that victory no longer brought her joy. What was strength worth if no one could match it? One silent evening, while she trained in the empty arena under a sky full of stars, a strange object appeared in the sky. It was small, metallic, and burned through the clouds before landing beyond the dunes. The guards rushed toward the crash site, and within minutes a figure stepped out of the smoke. He was not alien, not Valkaran, but something completely different. A human. His name was Captain Raylan, an explorer from the forgotten colonies near Earth. He had come seeking water, fuel, and safe passage through Valkaran space. When he entered the alien city, everyone stared at him with amusement and disgust. To them, humans were weak, small, soft, emotional beings from a dying world. But Raylan walked calmly, his eyes scanning everything, his posture steady. He carried no heavy weapons, no armor, only a simple blade strapped to his back. When the guards demanded his purpose, he simply said, "I seek trade, not trouble." But his voice, calm and fearless, made even the guards hesitate. News of the strange visitor reached Serenia within the hour. At first she laughed. "A human? In my city? Perhaps he wants to sweep the arena after my battles." Yet something about the story caught her attention. She ordered her soldiers, "Bring him to me." When Raylan entered the great hall, Serenia stood tall upon her throne of steel. She looked down at him, expecting fear, but he only met her eyes with quiet respect. "You are the unbeaten warrior?" he asked. His tone was not mocking. It was curious, honest. Serenia frowned, unused to such calmness. "I am. And you are?" "Just a traveler," he replied, "but I've heard your challenge." Her smile returned, dangerous and proud. "Then you wish to fight me?" "I wish to understand why you fight," he answered. The hall fell silent. No one had ever asked her that before. "Because strength must be proven," she said coldly. "Or because you are afraid to be forgotten?" he asked softly. Her heart skipped for a moment. His words cut deeper than any blade. In that instant, she saw something in him that she had not seen in anyone before. Fearless truth. Without another word, she stood and raised her spear. "Human, if you truly wish to understand my strength, face it," she declared. The guards laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Raylan stepped forward unflinching. "I accept," he said, "but if I win, you must answer my question honestly." She nodded. "If you win, which you won't." That night, the announcement echoed across Valkara. For the first time, the unbeaten warrior would face a human. Crowds gathered from every corner of the planet to witness the impossible. Some came to laugh, others to watch a quick death. But Serenia, she felt something she had not felt in years. Curiosity. As the arena lights flared, the human stepped into the sand. He looked small compared to her towering figure, but his eyes were calm, his stance firm. He looked at her not with fear, but with respect, and something else. Belief. Serenia raised her weapon, smiling faintly. "You may regret this, human." Raylan smiled back. "I regret nothing." And when the signal horn roared across the arena, the unbeaten warrior charged like a storm. But Raylan didn't flinch. He moved with the grace of a man who had fought for survival his whole life. The crowd fell silent as the first clash of steel echoed under the burning suns, and for the first time in 7 years. Serenia wondered if this battle might not end the way she expected. The crowd exploded with excitement as the horns of the arena echoed through the hot air. For the first time in history, a human was facing the unbeaten warrior of Valkara. Every seat was filled, every alien eager to see the strange new challenger fall. Serenia stood tall, her armor shining like molten silver, her spear humming with energy. She looked at the human across from her. No armor, no shield, only a simple metal blade at his waist. "How do you expect to live, fragile one?" she asked coldly. Raylan gave a small smile. "By thinking faster than I fall," the signal horn blared, and the duel began. Serenia moved like lightning, her first strike cutting through the air with deadly precision. But Raylan was gone before it hit, sliding under the blow and striking her leg. The metal barely scratched her armor, but the crowd gasped. No one had ever landed the first move on Serenia. She turned sharply, her eyes glowing with challenge. "Not bad, human, but let's see how long you last." Her next attack came harder, faster, each strike powerful enough to shatter stone. Raylan ducked, rolled, and jumped, every motion precise, every dodge perfectly timed. He wasn't faster than her, but he was smarter. He watched her patterns, every shift of her feet, every motion of her shoulders. Serenia grew frustrated. No opponent had ever survived more than a few minutes against her, but this human refused to yield even when she knocked him to the ground. He got back up, dust covering his torn shirt, blood dripping from his cheek. "You should stay down," she warned. Raylan laughed softly. "You said you'd obey the one who could defeat you." "I'm not done yet." The crowd began to fall silent. They had come to see him crushed, but something strange was happening. They started to admire him, a human who could not match her strength, yet still refused to kneel. Every movement told a story of survival, of countless fights against impossible odds. Serenia attacked again, her spear moving like a streak of lightning. Raylan barely dodged it, feeling the air burn past his face. He slid behind her, striking a weak joint in her armor with his blade. Sparks flew, just a small hit but enough to make her stumble. Her pride burned hotter than her wounds. "You're clever, human," she hissed, "but cleverness won't save you." Raylan backed away slowly, breathing heavily. "I don't need saving," he said. "I just need you to understand something." She frowned. "Understand what?" "That strength without reason is just noise," he said, tightening his grip on his blade. His words cut deeper than any weapon. For a moment, she hesitated, her strike slowing just slightly, and in that hesitation, he found his chance. She lunged forward, her spear thrusting with full force. Raylan sidestepped, catching her arm and spinning with her own momentum. He twisted her wrist, grabbed the spear shaft and slammed it into the ground. In one clean motion, he pulled her off balance and pressed the edge of his blade against her throat. The arena went completely silent. Only the sound of their heavy breathing echoed between them. Serenia's eyes widened. No one had ever disarmed her before. She could have broken free, maybe, but she didn't. Because in that instant, she saw something in his eyes that froze her. Not pride, not cruelty, honor. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't mocking. He looked at her with calm respect, as if he didn't want to hurt her at all. The crowd waited for the killing blow, but Raylan stepped back, lowering his blade. I didn't come to own you, he said softly. I came to remind you what real strength is. Serenia stood slowly, breathing hard, her pride wounded but her spirit trembling. No one had ever spared her. No one had ever defeated her and walked away. The silence broke when she knelt, pressing one knee into the sand. I yield, she whispered. The entire arena gasped. The unbeaten warrior had surrendered. Her voice was steady but soft. As I promised, I will obey only the one who could defeat me, she said. Her head bowed. Raylan blinked in disbelief. I didn't fight to make you a slave. But she raised her eyes, calm and certain. Then you fought for something greater, she said, and that's why you won. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some cheered, others shouted in anger. A human had done the impossible. He had defeated Valkara's greatest warrior without cruelty, without hatred, and worse, he had earned her respect. As Serenia stood beside him, the rulers of Valkara watched from their thrones, whispering among themselves. They did not like what they saw. A human with influence over their champion. A warrior bound by her own vow to follow him. It was more than an insult. It was a threat. But for Raylan and Serenia, that moment changed everything. The unbeaten warrior had found someone stronger, not in power, but in spirit. And the human who came seeking supplies had unknowingly won something far more dangerous. Her loyalty, her heart, and the attention of every powerful enemy in the galaxy. As the sun set behind the mountains, the two figures stood side by side in the golden light. Neither spoke, but both knew that their story had only just begun. And somewhere deep inside her, Serenia whispered to herself, he defeated me. But why do I feel like I don't want him to stop? The arena was still ringing with the echo of disbelief. The unbeatable alien warrior, Serenia of Valkara, had bowed her head before a human. The moment was burned into the memory of every witness. No one dared move or speak. Even the rulers of the city sat frozen. Watching as the impossible unfolded, Raylan stood quietly, his chest rising with heavy breaths, his blade still in hand. He couldn't believe what had just happened. He hadn't wanted this fight to prove dominance, he had only wanted to understand her. But now the greatest warrior of the planet was kneeling at his feet. Her silver armor cracked, her knees pressed into the sand. Her voice steady and clear. As I swore before all Valkara, she said, I obey the one who defeats me. The words carried across the arena like thunder. Every warrior felt them, every leader heard them. The silence broke into shouting and chaos. Some demanded her to rise. Others shouted to kill the human before he became dangerous. Raylan looked around, uneasy, and turned back to her. Stand up, he said softly. You don't need to kneel before me. But Serenia shook her head. It is my honor, human. Guards rushed forward. Their weapons raised, one shouted, This is not possible. The unbeaten cannot serve a human. Serenia rose to her feet and her glare silenced them. Would you dishonor the vow of Valkara? She asked coldly. Her tone held such power that the guards instantly stepped back. She turned to Raylan, her expression unreadable. You have my loyalty now. He didn't answer right away. He didn't know what to say. All he could do was nod slightly, feeling the weight of something far bigger than victory settle on his shoulders. Later that night, the city burned with rumors. The alien taverns whispered of the strange man who beat the champion with a single blade. Some called him a liar, others called him a magician, but a few, those who had seen his eyes, called him something far more dangerous. A leader in the warriors' quarters, Serenia stood before her broken armor. The cracks and dents told the story of her defeat, yet she didn't feel shame, only confusion. For the first time, she didn't know who she was without her pride. Her reflection stared back at her from the metal, cold, proud yet uncertain. A quiet voice interrupted her thoughts. I never wanted this, said Raylan from the doorway. She didn't turn. Then why did you fight? He stepped inside, his step slow. Because your challenge wasn't about strength, he said. It was about meaning. You wanted someone to see you. Those words hit her harder than any strike. Her hands trembled slightly. Do you think I need to be seen? She asked quietly. I think, he said. You've been seen your whole life, but never understood. The silence between them grew heavy. For years, people had looked at her with fear, respect, and awe, but never with understanding. And here was this strange human, calm and broken from battle, who somehow saw through her armor. She turned toward him, her eyes softening. Then what do you want, human? She asked. Raylan smiled faintly. A friend? Maybe. The word friend felt foreign on her tongue. No one had ever dared to use it with her. And yet she didn't reject it. The next morning, she appeared beside him before the Council of Valkara. The rulers were furious. You shame us, Serenia, shouted one elder. You bow before a creature from a dying world. Serenia's voice was calm. He defeated me with more than strength. He fought with honor in mind, not just power. You should respect that. Her defense only made the council angrier. They turned their attention to Raylan. You will leave this planet at once, the High Chancellor ordered. But Serenia stepped in front of him, her spear raised. If he leaves, I leave with him. The hall went silent. No one had ever heard her defy the council before. Her voice was unshaken. My vow is not yours to command. The High Chancellor's eyes burned with fury. Then go, warrior, but remember, when you walk with the human, you walk away from your people. She looked back only once, then turned to Raylan. I have already chosen my path, she said softly. They left the shining city together, walking across the endless dunes toward the crash site of his ship. The sun sank low behind them, painting the sky with red fire. Neither spoke for a long time, until Raylan finally asked, Why did you follow me? Serenia answered without hesitation. Because I was defeated, she said, then paused. And because I don't want to be alone anymore. The words were honest. Simple and heavy, Raylan looked at her, and for the first time, he smiled, not out of pride, but understanding. Then you're not alone, he said that night. They camped beside the glowing wreck of his small ship. The firelight flickered across her silver armor. She sat quietly, watching the flames. You know, she said, no one has ever spared me after victory. You could have ended me. Raylan looked into the fire. I didn't come here to take lives. I came to find purpose, he said. She tilted her head slightly. And did you find it? He met her gaze, the fire reflecting in his eyes. Maybe I just did, he whispered. Above them, the stars shimmered. 2 souls, 1 human, 1 alien, bound by an ancient vow and a strange new feeling neither of them fully understood. And somewhere deep inside Serenia's heart, a new promise began to form, not one of obedience, but one of loyalty, respect, and something that even she feared to name. As the fire burned lower, she whispered to herself, he defeated me once, but every word he speaks defeats me again. The twin moons of Valkara hung low in the sky as Raylan and Serenia left the glowing cities behind. They walked through endless dunes and canyons where ancient statues of forgotten warriors stood buried in sand. Each night the fire between them burned small but warm, and with every passing day, the silence between them became comfortable. Serenia, once feared by entire armies, now listened quietly when Raylan spoke of distant human worlds and oceans that shimmered under blue skies. For the first time in her life, she found peace not in fighting but in the calm of his voice. Yet peace never lasts long on Valkara. In the dark chambers of the ruling council, anger and fear grew like fire. The elders couldn't forget what they had seen. Their greatest warrior kneeling before a human, to them it was humiliation. They decided that the only way to erase that shame was to challenge Raylan again. This time not with honor, but with deceit. 3 alien lords met in secret. Each commanded legions of warriors and machines built for destruction. One of them, a scarred, massive creature named Lord Kor, spoke first. This human has poisoned our champion's mind, he growled. He must be crushed before he spreads his weakness, another hissed. She defends him as if he were her king. The people whisper about her loyalty to him. That cannot stand, and so they made a plan. They would summon Raylan under the promise of peace, then destroy him in front of Serenia to prove that humans were nothing but fragile beasts pretending to be brave. Far away, in the desert camp, Raylan worked to repair his small ship. The hull was cracked, engines silent and fuel nearly gone. He often caught Serenia watching him as he worked, her eyes filled with quiet curiosity. Why do you always fix things yourself? She asked one night. He smiled faintly. Because where I come from, no one else will do it for you. She nodded slowly. Humans, always standing alone, even when surrounded by others. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Maybe that's why we're so stubborn. She laughed softly, a rare sound that made the quiet desert feel alive. But the laughter faded when a messenger arrived. He was a tall alien soldier in silver armor. Bowing low before Serenia, "My lady," he said. The High Lords request your presence in the capital. They seek peace with the human you serve. Raylan raised an eyebrow. Peace? After what happened? Serenya's instincts screamed danger, but she also knew the code of Valkara. Refusing a summons was a mark of cowardice. She turned to him. If this is a trap, we'll face it together. He nodded. I wouldn't have it any other way. When they entered the capital again, the streets went silent. The people bowed to Serenya but whispered about the human walking beside her. He did not look afraid, only calm, inside the grand hall. The alien lord stood waiting. Their eyes cold and cruel, Lord Kor stepped forward, a smirk spreading across his scarred face. So, this is the human who broke our champion, he said mockingly. Raylan's eyes stayed steady. I didn't break her, I just fought fair. The lord's grin vanished. Then fight fair again. The hall trembled as heavy metal doors opened, and from the shadows, mechanical beasts emerged, towering machines shaped like dragons, their cores glowing red. This, Kor said, is the true test of strength. If you survive, we will believe your honor. Serenya's eyes widened. This isn't a duel, it's an execution. Kor sneered. A warrior of Valkara should know the difference. Raylan placed a hand on her arm gently. Let them, he said calmly. If I run, I prove them right. She stared at him in disbelief. You can't fight that thing, Raylan, it's not alive. He smiled slightly. Then it won't feel pain when I destroy it. The crowd gathered again, drawn by curiosity, by hatred, by awe. They filled the arena as the massive mechanical beast roared. Raylan stood alone in the sand, no armor, no shield. Only a strange human weapon glowing blue at his side. Serenya watched from behind the gate, her heart pounding. She wanted to rush in to protect him, but her vow held her back. She could not interfere unless commanded. The machine lunged, its claws tearing through the air. Raylan rolled aside, firing bursts of plasma that struck its armor. It staggered but did not fall. He dodged again. Using speed and timing instead of power, Serenya could see it. His moves were not random. He was studying the machine, learning its rhythm just as he had learned hers. Suddenly, he sprinted forward, sliding under the creature's arm and planting a small device on its leg. The crowd gasped as blue light flashed. The device exploded, blowing the leg apart. The machine stumbled, roaring as smoke poured from its chest. Raylan climbed its back, sparks flying around him. He drove his blade deep into the glowing red core. A blinding light burst through the arena, followed by silence. When the smoke cleared, the machine lay still. Raylan stood over it. Breathing hard but smiling, Serenya ran to him, ignoring the council's shocked faces. You could have died, she said. Voice trembling, he looked at her softly. Maybe, but I knew you'd be there if I fell. For a moment, the warrior of Valkara, once a legend of pride and solitude, felt her heart beat faster than it ever had in battle. The lord stood speechless, their plan in ruins. Kor's voice broke through the silence, filled with rage. This isn't over, human. You've made enemies far greater than you can imagine. Raylan replied quietly. Then they'll have to imagine harder. As they left the arena together, the people bowed again, not just to Serenya but to him for the first time. Valkara's greatest warrior and the human who defeated her walked side by side. Not as master and servant, but as equals, bound by respect, trust, and something deeper that neither dared to name yet. That night under the twin moons, Serenya whispered as she looked at the stars. They tried to humiliate you, but instead they gave you a throne. Raylan smiled faintly beside the fire. I don't want a throne. She looked at him, her expression soft. Then what do you want? He met her gaze, the flames dancing between them. Just you by my side when the next storm comes, he said. And she knew then the next storm was already on its way. The desert wind howled softly through the canyon as Raylan and Serenya made camp far from the glowing cities. The stars above were endless, white, blue, and gold dots stretching across the sky like scattered embers. The night was quiet, too quiet. Even the creatures of Valkara stayed hidden, sensing something unseen moving through the dark. Raylan sat near the fire, polishing his blade, the same weapon that had saved him countless times. Serenya stood a few steps away, her armor reflecting the flames, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows, though she said nothing. Her instincts screamed that danger was near. She had lived through wars, fought beasts and armies, but tonight felt different, cold, deliberate, waiting. You're thinking too loudly again, Raylan said softly without looking up. Her head tilted, How do you always know what I'm thinking? He smiled faintly. Because every time you're worried, your right hand touches the hilt of your spear. She glanced down, realizing he was right, and then gave a quiet chuckle. You notice too much, human. He met her eyes. It keeps me alive. They didn't know that beyond the ridge. A group of shadowed figures watched them. Mercenaries paid by the alien lords, their leader, cloaked in black armor, whispered into a communicator. Targets confirmed. Orders are simple. Kill the human, capture the warrior alive. The mercenaries moved silently through the sand, their weapons humming with faint blue light. Hours passed. The fire burned lower, and Raylan finally closed his eyes to rest. Serenia stayed awake, her senses alert. Then she heard it, a faint click, like metal against stone. Before she could react, a flash of light burst from the darkness, and an energy dart struck her neck. She spun around, swinging her spear. But her limbs grew heavy. Another dart hit her shoulder, and the world tilted. She fell to one knee, gasping, "Raylan!" The human woke instantly, rolling aside as a plasma bolt scorched the ground where he'd been lying. He grabbed his weapon and fired into the darkness, each shot lighting the sand for a brief moment. Figures moved fast, too many of them surrounding the camp. "Serenia!" He shouted again, running toward her. She tried to stand, her muscles trembling, her vision blurring. "Don't! Let them take you." He reached her side, catching her before she collapsed completely. "Stay with me," he said, voice tight. She shook her head weakly. "Toxin. Paralyzing. Can't move." Raylan clenched his jaw. He could see the mercenaries closing in, their glowing eyes reflecting in the dark. There were at least 10 of them, armed, trained, ready. He laid Serenia gently behind a rock and whispered, "You trusted me to fight beside you. Now it's my turn." Then he turned toward the approaching attackers, his silhouette framed by the dying fire. "Come on then," he muttered. "Let's see what you've got." The battle that followed was chaos. Bright flashes tore through the night as Raylan moved like a ghost among them. He used the terrain, the firelight, and the shadows to confuse his enemies. Every shot he fired hit its mark, every move calculated and desperate. But there were too many, and exhaustion began to take hold. A plasma bolt grazed his arm. Another burned across his side. Still, he didn't stop. He fought not for victory, but to buy time. When his blaster ran dry, he switched to his blade. He leapt onto a rock and slashed downward. Taking one attacker with him, he rolled, kicked another aside, then dove behind the ruins for cover. His breathing was ragged, his mind sharp. He could hear Serenia's faint voice through the noise, whispering, "Raylan, please, survive." He looked back at her, motionless, glowing faintly under the moons, her eyes full of helpless fury. For the first time since he met her, she couldn't fight, and for the first time, he realized how much that scared her. The leader of the mercenaries stepped forward, his black armor reflecting the moonlight. "You fight well, human," he said, voice cold. "But this ends now." Raylan stood slowly, covered in dust and blood. "If it ends," he said, "then it ends with me standing." The armored leader raised his weapon, but before he could fire, a thunderous sound filled the air. The ground trembled as an ancient machine buried beneath the sand awoke. Raylan had triggered the old defense system from the ruins nearby, a risk he hadn't known would work. Beams of blue energy shot out, striking the attackers. Explosions lit up the night, and the mercenaries scattered in panic. Raylan dropped to his knees, exhausted watching the chaos unfold. When silence returned, he crawled back to Serenia and checked her pulse. It was weak but steady. He poured a vial of water mixed with a healing serum into her mouth. Her breathing slowed, her muscles twitching as the toxin began to fade. She opened her eyes slowly, whispering, You didn't run." He smiled faintly. "And missed the chance to save the strongest warrior I've ever met?" She blinked back tears, something she'd never done before. "You risked your life for me," she said quietly. He touched her hand gently. "You'd do the same." As the moon sank lower, the smoke from the battle drifted into the sky. Serenia sat weakly beside the fire, watching Raylan as he cleaned his wounds in silence. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but words felt too small. Finally, she said softly, "Raylan, when I took my vow, I thought it meant obedience." He looked at her curiously. "And now?" She smiled faintly. "Now it means trust." The desert wind carried her words away. And though both were battered, bruised, and scarred, something unbreakable had been forged that night. Not in victory, but in sacrifice, neither of them noticed the drone high above, recording everything and sending it back to the alien lords, for in their moment of peace, a new threat was already rising, and this time, it would not come in the night, it would come from the sky. The morning after the ambush came with a blood-red sunrise. Smoke still rose from the blackened dunes where the mercenaries had fallen. Raylan stood near the broken remains of one of their ships, his hands stained with oil and blood. Serenia watched him quietly, her armor still scorched from battle, her body recovering from the toxin. He had saved her life, and she would never forget it. But peace was short-lived above them. In the cold orbit of Valkara, fleets began to move. The alien lords, furious at their failure, had sent word across the stars. They called Raylan a threat to the Order, a dangerous human manipulating their greatest warrior soon. Not just soldiers, but entire armies would come hunting for them. Raylan knew it too. He stood beside the campfire that night, staring at the stars that glittered like silent eyes. Sooner or later, he said quietly, they'll come again. Not a few, but thousands. Serenia turned toward him, her silver eyes glowing faintly. Then we make them regret it, she said coldly. He smiled faintly. That's one way, but I'd rather end it before it starts. Over the next few days, they traveled deep into the wastelands, places where the sky shimmered with strange energy. Serenia guided him to the ruins of an old fortress, half buried under centuries of sand and stone. This place was once the home of the old guard, she explained. Warriors who fought not for power but for honor. Raylan looked around at the massive gates, the faded banners, the collapsed towers. It'll do, he said, we can rebuild. They worked together, scavenging old tech, repairing generators, and building defenses. Serenia trained him with alien weapons, and in return he taught her human tactics. At night they sat by the fire talking about their worlds, two different lives slowly becoming one. She told him about her childhood in the warrior academies. He told her about Earth's blue oceans and green forests and how humans once fought not for glory, but to protect what they loved. Each story brought them closer. But both knew that war was coming, and every laugh, every quiet moment felt borrowed. Soon word spread across the outer colonies. Rumors of a human and an alien warrior building something together. Some called them traitors, others called them heroes, and slowly, others began to come, outcasts. Ex-soldiers, refugees, humans and aliens alike. They found their way to the fortress, drawn by hope and by Raylan's message. Strength means nothing if it only destroys. Within weeks, the fortress was alive again. Workshops hummed, fires burned, and soldiers trained side by side. Serenia watched as a young alien soldier sparred with a human boy, both laughing when they fell into the sand. It made her chest ache in a way battle never had. She turned to Raylan and said quietly, "You did this." He shook his head. "No, we did, but not everyone wanted peace in the capital." Lord Kor watched from his high balcony as new fleets gathered under his command. "This is treason," he hissed to his generals. "Our greatest warrior fights beside a human. We will erase them both from history." The war drums began to sound. Echoing across every communication channel, ships prepared for launch, carrying weapons powerful enough to burn cities to ash down in the fortress. The sky darkened as storm clouds gathered, no natural storm, but the shadow of approaching warships. Alarms blared through the halls. Raylan and Serenia stood on the ramparts, watching the faint glow of engines breaking through the clouds. "They're here," he said, his voice calm but his eyes sharp. Serenia gripped her spear. "Then we meet them in the sky." Moments later, the first blast struck, shaking the ground beneath them. Dust and fire filled the air, and soldiers scrambled into defensive positions. Raylan gave orders with calm precision. "Pull civilians back into the tunnels. Focus fire on their landing ships." He moved like he had done this 100 times before. Fearless, focused, Serenia fought beside him, her spear glowing bright blue, slicing through drones and machines like lightning. In the chaos, a soldier shouted, "They're breaking through the east gate." Raylan sprinted toward it, his armor scorched. He climbed the shattered walls, firing his blaster until it overheated. Serenia followed, covering his flank with deadly strikes for every enemy that fell. 2 more landed, and through the smoke, she saw Lord Kor himself descend from his ship, towering, armored, and furious. "Serenia," he roared, "you've betrayed your blood for this." "Creature!" She stepped forward, eyes blazing. "I betrayed no one. You betrayed what it means to be Valkaran, He charged, swinging a massive energy blade. She met his strike, sparks flying. Raylan tried to help, but Kor's strength was immense. Each blow sent shockwaves through the ground. Serenia stumbled, her armor cracking. Raylan saw the opening, drew his last plasma grenade, and threw it between them. The explosion sent all three tumbling. When the dust cleared, Kor lay motionless, his armor shattered. Serenia crawled toward Raylan, who was bleeding badly. He gave a weak smile. "Did we win?" She pressed her hand to his wound. "Don't you dare die before I answer that." The fortress walls burned, but the alien fleet above began to retreat. Their leader was gone, their morale broken. The people of Valkara had seen something they could not unsee, a human who fought not for conquest, but for honor. As dawn rose over the battlefield, Serenia sat beside Raylan, holding his hand. The fortress was in ruins, but their people, human and alien, stood united for the first time in history. "You've changed my world, Raylan," she whispered. He looked at her weakly and said, "No, Serenia. You just reminded it what honor means," she smiled softly, tears glinting in her eyes. And though the war had only begun, they both knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never see humans the same way again. The morning after the siege came with silence, heavy, sacred silence. Smoke curled above the broken fortress, painting the sky in shades of gold and gray. The air still carried the scent of fire and steel, but beneath it was something new. Hope. Raylan lay on a medical cot inside the ruined command hall, his body wrapped in healing cloth, his breathing slow but steady. Beside him sat Serenia, her armor battered, her hair loose, her hands trembling slightly though she tried to hide it. She had faced armies without fear, but seeing him nearly die had shaken her in ways no blade ever could. When he opened his eyes, weak but smiling, she exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Still alive," he murmured, voice rough but teasing. Serenia's lips curved faintly. "Barely. You always find new ways to make me worry." Outside, the surviving soldiers, both human and alien, worked together, repairing walls and carrying the wounded. The alliance that started with 2 people had now become an army of belief. Word had already spread across nearby systems, stories of a human and a Valkaran warrior who fought side by side. Planets that once feared humanity began to speak their name with respect, even admiration, and somewhere beyond the stars, the great powers of the galaxy began to take notice. As the day grew brighter, the people gathered in the courtyard. Calling for their leaders, Raylan stood slowly, wincing from pain. But Serenia supported him, her arms steady around his waist. When they stepped out, the crowd fell silent, hundreds of eyes turning toward them. Raylan's voice, though weak, carried across the wind. "You all fought for something greater than victory. You fought for each other. That's what makes us strong." His words weren't loud, but they were felt. And in that moment, soldiers who had once hated each other now stood side by side, united not by race but by purpose. Serenia stepped forward, her spear raised high, the symbol of her people gleaming in the sunlight. "I swore once," she said, her voice echoing across the walls, "that I would obey only the one who could defeat me." She turned to look at Raylan, her gaze soft but full of power. "And he did, not with his blade, but with his heart." The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound rolling like thunder through the valley. Even the wounded lifted their voices, chanting his name for the first time in her life. Serenia smiled without pride, only peace. But far above, the war was not yet finished. A new fleet appeared on the horizon, ships of the Valkaran Dominion, larger and darker than any before. The ground trembled as their engines filled the sky. The Alliance army froze, realizing the war was not over. It had only reached its final chapter. Raylan's face hardened. "They won't stop," he said quietly. "They'll burn this world to erase the truth." Serenia nodded, her grip tightening on her spear. "Then we make sure the truth burns brighter." They stood together on the battlements as the fleet began its descent. Raylan turned to her. "If this is our last stand..." She cut him off gently. "Then we stand together." Their eyes met, no more words needed. The first wave struck like a storm, missiles raining down, shaking the fortress, but this time, humanity and Valkara fought as one. Human engineers manned the cannons, alien warriors led charges, and the air blazed with the light of both species' weapons. Raylan coordinated defenses from the tower, his commands clear, his strategies precise. Serenia led the front lines, her spear slicing through enemy machines with fierce grace. Together they turned chaos into unity. The alliance was no longer a dream, it was real, and it was unstoppable. Then came the flagship, descending like a dark god from the sky. From it emerged the supreme commander of the Dominion, a towering figure of obsidian armor and cold fury. "You have broken our laws," he thundered, "and for that this world will burn." Serena stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. "Then you'll have to burn me first." The commander laughed cruelly. "You are no longer Valkaran." Raylan's voice rose from behind her. "No, she's something greater." The final battle raged, fire and light consuming the sky. Raylan and Serena fought back to back, their movements in perfect rhythm. Each covered the other's blind spot. Each fought as if the other's life meant their own. And when the commander lunged forward, striking Serena down, Raylan caught her before she fell. He stood over her, fury blazing in his eyes. "You wanted to see what humans are capable of," he shouted. He lifted the fallen alien weapon beside him, a massive plasma spear, and charged. The commander swung his blade, but Raylan drove the spear straight through his chest. The explosion that followed lit the sky for miles, a burst of white and blue that tore through the flagship and sent the remaining fleet scattering. When the smoke cleared, Raylan collapsed beside Serena. She opened her eyes weakly, smiling through tears. "You did it." He shook his head, reaching for her hand. "We did it," she squeezed his hand gently. "You defeated the strongest of my kind, and the hardest part of me," he smiled faintly. "And now?" She leaned closer, whispering, "Now I'll never leave your side." The battlefield fell silent as the surviving ships retreated. All around them, soldiers, human and alien, raised their weapons to the sky in salute. The war was over, but the legend had just begun. Years later, songs would be sung of the human who defeated the unbeaten warrior, and of the warrior who chose to follow him not out of duty, but love. Together they changed the galaxy's understanding of strength, not through conquest but through compassion. For in the end, it wasn't the strongest who ruled the stars, it was the ones who stood together when everyone else fell apart. And on a quiet night under the twin moons of Valkara, Serena stood beside Raylan on the rebuilt fortress wall. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "You once said you wanted no throne." Raylan smiled softly. "I still don't." She turned to him, her hand slipping into his. "Then let the stars be your crown," she said. And together, they watched the dawn rise on a galaxy forever changed.